Gunshots echoed through the dense forest, smoke mingling with the scent of pine and the cold bite of the early morning air. The clash of metal against metal and the cries of wounded men created a cacophony of chaos. In the midst of this turmoil, a young Wampanoag warrior, his face painted with the symbols of his ancestors, charged forward, spear in hand, to defend his homeland from the encroaching settlers. This was one of the parts they hardly ever tell you when talking about Thanksgiving. The conflict was fierce, the stakes high. On one side, the European settlers, driven by their desperate need for land and resources, fought with muskets and determination. On the other, the Wampanoag, armed with traditional weapons and an unyielding resolve to protect their way of life, fought with the knowledge that this land was theirs, passed down through generations. "Hold the line," shouted a Wampanoag leader, his voice rising above the din. For our ancestors, for our future, the settlers had come seeking a new life, a fresh start in this unfamiliar land. Yet, they found themselves in the middle of a struggle for survival against a people who knew the land intimately and were willing to fight to the death to protect it. As the battle raged on, it became clear that this was not just a simple skirmish, but a clash of civilizations, each with its own history, culture, and vision for the future. The settlers, who would later be known as Pilgrims, had their own narrative, one that would be passed down through generations as the story of Thanksgiving. But the reality was far more complex, far more brutal. The story most of us learn in school goes something like this. In 1621, the Pilgrims, having survived a harsh winter with the help of the Wampanoag people, held a 3-day feast to celebrate their first successful harvest. They invited their Native American allies to join them in this celebration, symbolizing peace and cooperation between the two groups. This feast is said to have included turkey, corn, cranberries, and other foods that have become staples of the modern Thanksgiving dinner. The real history is far more sobering. The Wampanoag people had been interacting with Europeans long before the arrival of the Pilgrims. These interactions were marked by violence, enslavement, and the devastating impact of European diseases, which decimated their population. The feast in 1621 did happen, but it was far from the harmonious event often depicted. The Pilgrims, having barely survived their first year, were indeed thankful for the help they received from the Wampanoag. However, the feast was more of a pragmatic alliance than a celebratory gathering of friends. The Wampanoag, led by Chief Osamaquin, also known as Massasoit, participated in the feast because they saw it as a strategic move to maintain peace and secure an alliance that could help protect them from rival tribes and other threats. One of the enduring symbols of Thanksgiving is the turkey, but this bird was not necessarily the centerpiece of the 1621 feast. The Pilgrims and the Wampanoag likely consumed a variety of foods, including venison, seafood, and fowl. Edward Winslow, one of the Pilgrims, wrote in a letter that the men went on a fowling mission, which likely included ducks and geese. Over time, turkey became associated with Thanksgiving, partly because it is native to North America and was a plentiful source of meat for the early settlers. The traditional Thanksgiving story glosses over the harsh realities faced by Native Americans, including the Wampanoag, who endured violence, disease, and displacement. Historian David Silverman, in his book This Land is Their Land, sheds light on these dark chapters of history. He explains how false historical narratives harm the Wampanoag people and distort the true nature of their relationship with European settlers. Silverman's research reveals that the Wampanoag had significant interactions with Europeans long before the Pilgrims arrived, involving both conflict and cooperation, but often resulting in exploitation and suffering for the Native Americans. Osamaquin, the Wampanoag chief, initially saw the Pilgrims as potential allies. Faced with threats from rival tribes and the lingering impact of European diseases, he sought to forge an alliance to protect his people. The Pilgrims, desperate and struggling to survive their first harsh winter, were eager to accept his help. For a time, this alliance seemed to benefit both parties. The Pilgrims received crucial assistance in the form of food and agricultural knowledge, which helped them survive. In return, the Wampanoag hoped for support against their enemies and a stable relationship with these new settlers. But this fragile peace was not to last. One of the major sources of conflict between the Wampanoag and the European settlers was their differing views on land ownership. The Wampanoag believed in communal land use, where land was shared among the community for hunting, farming, and living. In contrast, the Europeans sought permanent, individual ownership, leading to disputes and wars. These cultural misunderstandings were not just about land. They reflected deeper differences in worldview and values. For the Wampanoag, the land was a living entity, to be respected and shared. For the settlers, it was a resource to be owned and exploited. This fundamental clash of beliefs led to significant conflicts as settlers encroached further into Wampanoag territory. The consequences for the Wampanoag were devastating. Land loss, resource depletion, and epidemics took a heavy toll. The once thriving tribe found themselves increasingly marginalized, their way of life under constant threat. The culmination of these tensions was King Philip's War, a brutal conflict that drastically shifted power to the European settlers and marked the beginning of the end for the Wampanoag's dominance in their homeland. The misrepresentation of Thanksgiving is not just a matter of historical accuracy, it has real-world implications. By perpetuating the myth of a peaceful Thanksgiving celebration, we neglect the true struggles faced by Native Americans and the ongoing impact of colonialism. The story we tell about Thanksgiving shapes our understanding of history and influences how Native American contributions and experiences are perceived today. Thanksgiving as we know it today began to take shape in the 19th century. It was partly a means for white Americans to assert cultural dominance amidst social changes and immigration. The holiday's promotion was driven by Sarah Josepha Hale, a writer and editor, who campaigned for a National Day of Thanks. Her efforts culminated in President Abraham Lincoln proclaiming Thanksgiving a national holiday in 1863 during the Civil War to foster unity in a divided nation. This version of Thanksgiving was a departure from the earlier regional harvest festivals. It was shaped to emphasize themes of gratitude, family, and national unity. However, this constructed narrative came at a cost, sidelining the true stories and contributions of Native Americans. The focus shifted to a more harmonious and simplified story, one that fit the needs of a country looking for cohesion during turbulent times. To honor Thanksgiving truthfully, it is important to include Native American perspectives. Recognizing the injustices they faced and the resilience they demonstrated is essential. This means acknowledging the complexities of history and the ongoing impact of colonialism on Native American communities. Teaching accurate history, including the realities of Native American resistance and survival, is crucial. By understanding the true story of Thanksgiving, we can work towards a more inclusive and equitable historical narrative. As we enjoy our Thanksgiving meals, let us remember the Wampanoag and other Native American tribes who faced unimaginable hardships and fought bravely to protect their way of life. Let us honor their legacy by working towards a future where their history is accurately represented and their rights are fully recognized. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.